Mary Ann McCracken, whose foundation we're launching this evening, was born in 1770. And she and her family were much involved with the Belfast Charitable Society. Mary Ann was on the Ladies' Committee. She was interested in the welfare of poor women and children who were accommodated in Clifton House in those early days. And she was interested in the education of the children, in the apprenticeships being provided. We've taken Mary Ann McCracken as our inspiration and model and created the Mary Ann McCracken Foundation. She lived in turbulent times at the end of the 18th and the first half of the 19th century. It was a period of revolution. She committed herself to a multitude of good causes. She was a remarkable woman and led a fascinating life. One of the earliest actions of the foundation was to republish her biography, which was first published in 1960. And it's now available, published through the Irish Academic Press. And if you haven't got a copy, I recommend it. We've also produced a walking map of Belfast showing sites that Mary Ann would have been familiar with, or what now stands in their place in Belfast. And it is a very interesting and useful guide.
We're here today in part to remember the life of one of those abolitionists, your own Mary Ann McCracken. And it's been asked recently, why is she not a household name? Why a woman well known in her lifetime, so remarkable, so engaged on so many issues, on so many fronts, could have been so forgotten? Part of the answer is certainly gender. Mary Ann sits alongside thousands of notable, remarkable, dynamic women forgotten to history or known only through their interactions with men. She is also inevitably a victim of the ways in which Irish history, in certain forms and certain tellings of British history, is often relegated to a separate, marginal, annexed subject. Another reason for her undeserved obscurity is that for a long time there was a conviction in the minds of many that Britain's relationship with enslavement ended in 1834 with the emancipation of the 80,000 enslaved people within the British Empire and their final manumission 4 years later. The great anti-slavery campaigns that operated beyond 1834 have been particularly prone to historical disappearance, despite the scale of those campaigns, despite how vocal and respected and well-known their leading figures were. Yet another reason for Mary Ann's lack of profile is that abolition in Britain has for too long been dominated by the reputation of William Wilberforce. Although I admire Wilberforce, there is a cult around him that has acted as an historical black hole into which have collapsed the narratives of other figures. If such a fate could befall Thomas Clarkson, the most critical and engaged figure alongside Wilberforce in the struggle against the slave trade, and a man involved in the struggle against slavery and in anti-slavery into the 1840s, up to his death, it's unsurprising that it should have led to the diminution of historical reputations of other figures like Mary, far from the centre of power in London, and women. However, what also needs to be recognised is the extent to which political campaigners like Mary Ann were willing to do something that most people now find difficult even to envisage, and that is to dedicate their lives almost wholly to moral campaigns. Not their online lives, likes and follows, but their actual lives, through meetings and petition and leafleting and the ceaseless, endless, tireless campaigning to draw the attention of an often disinterested public to the suffering of other people thousands of miles away. Increasingly, we know that right now in China, the production of cotton in parts of that country is carried out by members of the Uyghur minority who are the victims of a modern form of enslavement. Cotton, the fundamental commodity behind American slavery that drove the British Industrial Revolution, that Mary Ann McCracken fought so hard against, now in the 21st century once again, is picked by the hands of people who are unfree, right now in our own times. We know all of this, and yet no grassroots moral campaign on anything like the scale of that of the abolitionists and the anti-slavery campaigners of the 18th and the 19th centuries has emerged. Where is our equivalent of the sugar boycott? Where are our mass meetings and our monster petitions? Why do our politicians not quake in fear at our moral indignation? Our inaction, our political and moral passivity, our lack of outrage, I think, would surprise and disappoint women like Mary Ann McCracken, those who stood and struggled alongside the enslaved in the 19th century. Reviving her name and rediscovering her story and those of others like her might, I hope, I contend, help us to rediscover the moral indignation that I fear we are going to need in our own strange and disturbing and bewildering times.